Hi, welcome! Today we are doing a Firebase tutorial. We are mainly focusing on authentication. We will learn about creating an account for a user and then have them log in. Here's how this tutorial is going to go. I won't go too much in detail with the HTML or the CSS, but feel free to take a look at it. We will create a Firebase project together and take a super close look at the JavaScript code that makes it all happen. So since we're going to be using Firebase, it's important we know what it is. So Firebase is Google's development platform that helps you build, improve, and grow your app. To be more specific, some of the benefit is that it has built-in analytics, and today we're going to use it for authentication and its database feature. It's great if you don't want to use Node.js, since it can also be used for data storage. Having Firebase and Node.js in your arsenal is great. All the code is on my GitHub, and the link is in the description below. Let's take a look at what we're making today. So here's our demo. So here's our login page where we can sign up with a name, an email, and a password. So when I click sign up, it tells me I successfully created an account. Great. And now if I try to log in, it tells me I can't because I need to verify my email. Let's do that. Here is a screenshot of the email you receive from Firebase when you sign up with our app. You have to click the link to verify your email, and you can totally customize this email yourself if you want. All right, now that I have successfully verified my email, I can go ahead and log in. And it takes a little bit of time because I use a set timeout function in JavaScript. And boom, now it says, hi, nice to see you here, Jessica. So it grabs the name I used when I registered. It's important that we take a look at the folder and the files that we have downloaded or cloned from the GitHub repo. Here, server.js is at the root. My Firebase code is inside index.js. Here, the only reason I have p5.js is because I'm using the setup function, which is a p5 default function that runs constantly in index.js. It's not an efficient way, but then I don't have to worry about having to call setup. So in the link in the bio, you can go ahead and click on the repository. You get here, unless I change this demo. We have our login demo. You can go ahead and either download the zip file, so you would download the whole thing, and you can just use the login demo and not care about the rest, or you can just clone it in your terminal. Great, so I have CD'd into my login demo, so I can see all the files that's inside. Source is a folder, so I can CD into that folder and see what's inside of it. Then I can go backward and I'm back in my login demo folder. So we're missing a node module right now, which I purposely ignored to push to GitHub. The way we want to do this is that we want to install Express and Notif. Notif is a JavaScript library for those notifications that you saw from the demo. And Express is so we can have a local server. Now that we have all of the library installed, we can go ahead and do npm start server.js. And then you can see it says server started on port 3000. So I'm in my Google Chrome, and if I reload, bam, now I have my local server running. Well, let's create a Firebase account and project. So you can go ahead and head to firebase.google.com, log in with your Gmail account, and let's create a project. Once you're logged in, you can create a new project. You can pick whatever name you want, and then just click continue. Here, it'll just be a ton of things you don't have to read. And just for today, you don't need to do all of this thing, but let's create a project. So this is like your main page, like your console. So on the left, we're going to go to authentication. And since I don't have anything, there's nothing there, but I highly recommend you go through the documents. Then there's a real-time database, which we can directly write into it and add some information. So in authentication, you can enable the email, so that way you just log in with email. You can do the others a different time if you want. And then for the email, here's the email template that you can edit and change. And here's where all of the registered user will be at. Then you want to go to your project settings and go to general to add your app. So here at the bottom, you can click this button and then it'll open this window and you can register your app and create a nickname for it. Then you just click this button and now a lot of things is going to appear. So here's a lot of JavaScript code, which is what we're going to be putting inside of our index.js. So you can go ahead and copy and paste it. Don't worry if you leave, the code will still be there. It'll be at the bottom here, and you can just go ahead and copy and paste that. So now let's set up our database. So we're going to create a database, and then you can just follow these easy steps and just enable the database so we can read and write information from it. Now, your database is empty because we just created the database, but let's change some rules. So we want to be able to read it and we want to be able to write it. So we're going to put true for both. It's definitely not ideal because then everybody can read and write from your database, but for this tutorial, we will do true and true. So it's easy for us to do this. This is what the database is supposed to look like with some information. If you try to run the code and create an account, this is what you'll see. And you'll also see an authentication, a new user being created. This is probably the most robust file. To keep this tutorial brief, I won't explain the basics of JavaScript or HTML or CSS. Take a look at server.js. Here I am using Express. We're creating a local server and I have some console.log so I can see what's happening. Here I'm using the terminal inside of VS Code. Highly recommend VS Code, by the way. So here I'm just doing npm start server like we did earlier. And here you can see server is starting now, which is my first console log, and then server started on port 3000, which is my second console log. So now if I go to localhost 3000 on Google Chrome, you'll see the application. Now if you want to stop your server, you can do Control-C. Here is my index.html, which is my login sign up page. In my head tag, I have all my scripts and CSS. Notif is a JavaScript library, which also has the CSS library that goes with it. Also, as a refresher, this is what my index.html looks like. For Firebase, you have to include all of these here. You might notice that that doesn't exactly look like what you copy and paste earlier. I omitted analytics because that could be a different video, and I also added more so it would work. I actually tried to just use what was in the copy and paste from earlier, and that didn't work for me, so I had to add these total. Then of course, I've included my JavaScript file, which we will talk in a second. Then all here, I have some standard HTML code for my name, email, and password. Each button has an on-click. The on-click JavaScript event occurs when the user clicks the button or the a tag here. So I won't be talking about resetting the password in this video, but let me know if you want me to do a part 2. The code to reset the password is in index.js, so if you're curious, you can totally take a look. Sweet. Now onto index.js, which is way more interesting. We have the Firebase config in our setup function right here. And the setup function actually goes all the way right here. Your configuration for your Firebase will look different. Please try to use your own. That way you have more control over it, and that way you get to create your own. Below our Firebase initialization code, so right underneath here. So right underneath, we have some code. to remove the data inside the database. Definitely keep it commented if you want to keep adding data to your database. But sometimes you might have like a ton of data in your database, especially if you're adding a ton of things to a user. You might want to just use this part here to just delete everything in your database. Make sure that if you want to delete your user, you also delete the user in the authentication. This here only deletes what's inside of your database. Sweet. So then next, we're going to take a look at signing up. So here we have our signing up function, which is called by our button. I first created an instance of my notif. Highly recommend you read the documentation for that library. The reason I'm having this is so I can use it to display a successful notification. Then I'm using our input tag to grab the value from the user. So this is why I'm using that value. So I'm using the document object model to grab these values. Then using Firebase Authentication, create user with email and password function. So right here, I am able to create an account where I have to pass in the email and the password to that function. The then method returns a promise. It takes up to 2 arguments. So a callback function for the success and a failure case of the promise. So while we create the account, it automatically creates a user, and we can specify the display name of that user, which is where we set the name. So this happens right here. I'm updating the profile and setting the display name to the name. Then I have a set timeout. The only reason I had to create this set timeout here, which actually it's much longer, it goes all the way here. So the reason I used this set timeout was because I was adding my database, quote unquote, the user folder with its email, user ID, and display name. Somewhere along the way, behind the scene, some information hadn't updated fast enough. I added a set timeout. I could do this not too fast. I recommend you add a console log for your user to see what unauth state changed returns. You'll notice that it'll be a pretty big dictionary. Mainly inside that set timeout, we're adding the info about the user into our database. And then after we update our database, so we are adding information, we are sending our user an email verification. And as always, you can use console log to see if everything works. So this function was pretty big and it had a lot. So definitely if you have any question, feel free to add it in the comments. All right, next up, we have our login function. So once you click the button login, it calls the login function, which does very similar thing to our sign up function. We access the email verified key. So right here, so as I mentioned earlier, user is like a dictionary. So I can do user.emailVerified to access what is currently there, which Firebase takes care of updating that for us. Email verified, if it's true, that means my user did verify their email. And if it's false, then they didn't. If they did, I give them a notification that they were successful. If they didn't verify it, then I throw an error notification, which is in red. Then I am calling my intro page function, which redirects us to another HTML page. Here is my intro page, which is a simple set timeout, and I'm just redirecting our window to this HTML page here. And 2000 is like 2 seconds. So now let's take a look at upage.html. Upage.html is fairly short. It has a lot of the same code as the index.html. The difference is I'm having some JavaScript inside of my HTML tag because I didn't want to do some other things. So this was a really short way to do this. So I'm just basically calling my setName function whenever the page loads. So basically when the document is like ready, so right away. So inside of our container, I have a couple of span tag, and one specifically right here has an ID name called name, which might not be the best ID name. But right there, I'm going to use this ID to display the user's name. So I'm going to do some JavaScript and just inject the name of the user that's currently logged in. Let's go back to our index.js file. Here is our setName function. It's a one line, so we love that. Here I'm just grabbing the HTML span tag with its ID, and then I just want to change the text it display. So I'm using inner HTML. Then I'm just grabbing the name of my current user. With that, this was our Firebase tutorial. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any question, or if you'd like to learn anything else, or if you'd like me to go more in depth.